So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to present another webinar on CARES Act updates and the PPP loan forgiveness recommendations. And we are excited to work together with the National ACE to present this workshop today. So before I introduce our sponsor who can make some remarks, I just want to recognize Chamber Board leadership. Also our sponsors who support our program throughout the year. If you are not a member yet, we love to invite you to join us, and please see the benefit and how you can join. You can easily just join on the website, and we offer many programs throughout the year supporting business to grow. So a couple of upcoming events. We're going to work together with ACE again next week and present this webinar on navigating key legal issues arising from the COVID-19. This is a new one we just put together. It's about the loan forgiveness recommendations. It will be offered in Chinese. And our GovCon series, every month we present a topic. So this is our signature event on the October 21st. It's the 11th Summit and Expo. So next, actually, let's welcome our sponsor today, Jimmy Lee from National ACE, to give some welcoming remarks. Jimmy, please.
Yeah, well, Cindy, thank you so much. I'm really grateful that you're able to join us or for us to be a part of what you're doing here today. We are a national chamber of commerce with 60 affiliates all over the country. And we've been really working hard with each of our different chamber partners to help small businesses understand everything, all the federal resources that are available, everything from the PPP to the EIDL program. I just saw somebody wrote a specific question about that as well too. You know, we're really thankful for you, for your board members, for allowing us to have these discussions, especially for so many small businesses during this time. I know for me, not only have I been working with a lot of restaurants and businesses all over the country, but my own parents also own a restaurant, and this is something that they've been really kind of working and struggling with. And I know even for them, the biggest question is, as we're looking at what COVID is happening to our country, you know, should they close their business? Should they continue? Should they open up? I think these are all questions that many of us are really working through right now. A couple of things, just so that we can highlight. I think many of us really know some of the data that's affecting Asian American small businesses, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. There's a recent report that came out from JP Chase that shows that Asian-owned businesses have declined 22% in early April. You know, at the end of March, we saw that revenues for most Asian American businesses were over 60% lower than they were in the prior year. And overall, what we've seen is Asian-owned businesses have experienced severe damages to their cash balances, revenues, and many of them are going to require assistance from the federal government in order to recover as well too. So those are some of the things that we've really been doing as an organization. We try to monitor what's going on at the federal level, and we try to be a voice for the businesses in our community. So for instance, one of the big things that we were really trying to advocate for is what we call the Paycheck Program Flexibility Act of 2020, which essentially modified the expense rule from 75-25 to 60-40 for borrowers, and it extended the loan covered period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks because we felt like that was really more of an asset and assistance to many small businesses. We were also instrumental in working with Congress to help extend the PPP deadline. As you saw, over $130 billion was available left over from this last round of CARES too. And so what we're trying to do now is we're working with our chamber affiliates and partners to make sure that people know that money is still out there and helping them apply for it as well too, both on the nonprofit as well as on the for-profit side. And, you know, as we're looking at this next round of CARES, our folks are really working with the Senate as well as the Congress to say, okay, these are the issues, not just our community is facing, but minority businesses in general are facing, and what does it look like for us to really help them? So for instance, one of the big things that we're advocating for right now is to say that anybody who received $150,000 or less from PPP should have their debt automatically forgiven and structured as a loan versus as a forgivable grant. And so those are some of the things that we're really looking for right now. So we're really glad to be a part of it. And Cindy, thank you so much for allowing us to be a partner for this.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for the wonderful sponsorship and partnership. And we applaud the important work National ACE offer to support the Asian business community throughout the country. Okay, next actually let's welcome Stephanie Shi, the chair of the board of Asian American Chamber, also vice president of M&T Bank. So she will help to moderate the panel today. Stephanie, please.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it seems like yesterday we were preparing a system for all customers to access PPP funds. And here we are now at the forgiveness stage. While it has been a lot of long days and nights, stepping up and assisting the small business community at this time has been one of the most fulfilling moments in my entire career. Today, a big thank to the Asian and Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, the National ACES support and sponsor. Phew, I have to hold my breath to say the name at once. I also want to thank AACC's board members fully support, as well as Dr. Cindy Shell's tirelessly organizing various webinars to help small business communities since March. Now I'm very pleased to introduce today's panelists. We have Rod Johnson from SBA. Rod holds a position as Lender Relations Specialist and a Small Business Development Center Project Manager. Rod was a commercial lender for 20 plus years, a business owner for more than a decade, and now is with the SBA. His extensive experience will connect dots for all. Next, attorney, Sherilyn LeBon, partner of Dunlap Bennett Lowick. Sherilyn's practice areas cover business, government contracting, and nonprofits. She is also a popular speaker on many events. Sherilyn has 20 plus years of experience. She was a high-ranking official at the SBA, the Department of Veteran Affairs, and as an advisor to members of Congress and presidential candidates. She's guiding her clients through the requirements of the SBA and Treasurer's new CARES Act. It's better to have an experienced attorney now rather than later. Last, CPA, a very important role. Harold Mon Jr., CEO of UHY Advisors Mid-Atlantic MD Inc. Harold has more than 30 years of experience providing comprehensive audit, tax, and financial consulting expertise to a wide range of industries. His company provides services to meet clients' needs, ranging from small business owners through the Fortune 500. Without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our panelists. First, let's have Rod Johnson from SBA to give us updates of CARES Act PPP forgiveness. Rod, over to you.
All right, well, thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Rod Johnson. I'm with the Small Business Administration. and I'm a Lender Relations Specialist and Small Business Development Center Project Officer. What I actually do on a day-to-day basis is burst open the doors of all the banks throughout the DMV so that they can actually put money in the hands of business owners to help you guys grow and sustain your businesses. So now let's talk about PPP, but before I talk about some of the changes to the PPP program, let me give you a few numbers to think about. As of July 1st, 2020, the loan count for PPP was 4.8 million loans that were processed for an amount of $521.4 billion. There were 5,461 lenders that actually helped get the PPP money out on the streets to you business owners. Now, how many jobs were actually reported as a result of people getting the PPP loans? There were 51.1 million jobs that were actually reported as a result of companies getting PPP. And let's keep in mind that the PPP program was set up for companies to be able to maintain their employees on the payroll as we get through COVID-19. The idea was not to have people go on unemployment. The PPP supports 51.1 million jobs, as much as 84% of all small business employees. 1/4 of all jobs supported, which are 13 million jobs, were in historically underutilized business zones, better known as hub zones. Now, PPP statistics across Census Tracts, because we've heard a lot about the money not going to low and moderate income areas. Well, PPP loans were made across economically diverse areas of the economy. Low and moderate income areas receive PPP loans approximately proportionate to their percentage of the population. And so low and moderate income, they got 27% of the PPP funds, and those not considered low or moderate received 72% of the PPP loans. The industries, the top 3 industries that received the money were the construction industry, healthcare and social assistance, and technical services. So those were the top 3 industries that received money from the PPP program. For religious, grant making, civic, professional, and similar organizations, you had 133 loans for $13.5 billion. And so that's a lot of money when you consider that generally religious organizations are not granted SBA funds. So who were the top lenders? JP Morgan Chase. They approved $29 billion. Bank of America, $25.2 billion, and Wells Fargo, $10.4 billion. And when we break it out throughout the DMV, there were 12,483 loans processed in Washington, D.C. for $2.1 billion. In Maryland, there were 81,315 loans processed for $10 billion. And in the Commonwealth of Virginia, there were 109,000 loans for $12.6 billion. Now, let's talk about some of the updates to the PPP program, which is now called the PPP Flexibility Act. And so here are the changes. As you know, when the program was rolled out, 75% of the funds had to be used toward payroll, and the other 25% were to be used towards rent, lease, interest on a commercial mortgage, business telephone, internet, gas, water, and electric. All right, that was 25%, and then the other 75% again was to be used for payroll. Under the new PPP Flexibility Act, now only 60% needs to be used towards payroll, and the other 40% can be used toward the operating expenses that I just mentioned. This is not the program to use for business development and other type of expenses. In order for the loan to be forgiven, You must use the funds in accordance to what the program says. The loan amount is still up to $10 million, reflecting 2.5 times the firm's average monthly payroll cost. As you remember, originally, you had 8 weeks to hire back your employees and use the funds in an 8-week period of time and then ask for forgiveness. Under the new plan, you have until December 31st to hire up, get your employees back in place, use the money, and then you can ask for forgiveness. Again, there are no fees associated with the loan. The collateral, there's none required. There's no personal guarantees required. If you recall, prior to June 5th, when the PPP Flexibility Act was approved, you only had 2 years to repay the loan if all of the money wasn't forgiven. Now you have up to 5 years to actually repay the loan. Keep in mind, now no payment is required for at least 1 year, which is the covered period plus 10 months. And of course, there is no prepayment penalty. And so that's pretty much what you have for the updates for the PPP Now Flexibility Act. Now, there's one other program, and we have about $134 billion left in the PPP program. The other program that I want to mention briefly is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, better known as EIDL. The maximum loan amount is $150,000. The interest rate is 3.75% for profit organizations and 2.75% for nonprofit organizations. The use of funds can be used for payroll, to pay rent, mortgage, utilities, payroll, fixed debts, accounts, and accounts payables. The maturity on that loan is 30 years. There are no loan fees. The collateral, for the loan amount of $25,000 or less, there is no collateral required. For $25,000 and greater, there will be a lien on the business assets. Personal guarantees are required. You don't have to make a payment on this loan for the first 12 months. And of course, there is no collateral. Right now, there's about $60 billion left in the EIDL program. And so if you have not applied for PPP or the EIDL, now is the time to do so. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Rod. Sherilyn and Harold,
Okay.
what are the top 3 PPP questions that you have been asked from your clients? Ladies first.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Just a quick disclaimer, nothing that I'm saying here can be construed as legal advice. This is strictly for educational purposes. So I get, as you can imagine, as many people on this webinar you've been asking and calling your accountants and lawyers, I get a number of questions every day. And I'm just going to share with you very quickly some of the latest questions I've been getting. First, we have new forms. So the SBA released, help me, Rod, I think it was 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
A new form. That shorter form, called the easy form, that is really for sole proprietors, independent contractors, or 1099s, and single member LLCs. If you are a business and you are employing people, unfortunately, you're still going to have to use that dreaded long form that's 11 pages. So that's one quick point. Another quick point, I get a lot of questions from government contractors. Obviously, in the region that we live in, we know that government contractors are quite plentiful in this area. Something to keep in mind for any of you that are subcontractors, government contractors, or even prime, if we have any on the call. During that 8-week covered period that you received your PPP loan and paid your employees, you cannot double bill. And that was very specific from the very beginning of when they passed the CARES Act. During that time, you have to give the government credit because they were very clear in the CARES Act that you cannot double bill during that 8-week covered period. And if anyone has more questions about that, we can get into it in the Q&A period. Finally, the last question I often get from clients is about documentation. It's a continued theme, something we've talked about since the pandemic started. Now we know in the updated guidance that's been coming out, it was coming out every week. Now it's sort of tapered off a bit. But we do know from the previous guidance that SBA does have the right to audit your loans even 6 years after it's been dispersed. So you really do need to keep great records. If you happen to close out your account with the bank that you have your PPP loan money in, then I would suggest that you download all that information and make sure that you are keeping hard copies of all of your loan documentation. And second of all, any documentation that you had, that you used to justify why you felt it was prudent and necessary to take out that PPP loan, you do want to retain those documents as well. I'll give you an example. Say, for example, you were relying on a certain contract or a certain vendor to pay you a certain amount of money. And when that money did not come in, money you were relying on, these were all the sorts of reasons why you decided to take out a PPP loan. You will want to retain that information because, again, when you filled out that PPP loan application, you certified that you needed the money. So you do want to retain those documents as cover and as backup to justify why you needed to take out that loan. With that, those are the three main questions I'm getting of late. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherilyn. Harold, how about you? I know you probably get tons of questions. What's the top three?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what the top three questions are because we get so many of them and it's always a little different. I think Sherilyn hit on a bunch of really good questions that have been coming up lately as it relates to those government contractors. One of the things that I think a lot of the questions recently that have come up as it relates to loan forgiveness is the calculation of the full-time equivalents. And it's really, really difficult sometimes because especially if they do payroll in-house, they may not have the data they need. And it's almost like you have to go back and kind of almost do the calculation by hand. So we get a lot of questions around the full-time equivalent calculation at the beginning, at the end. There's lots of questions about whether there's been a salary reduction of the 25%, because all those are going to reduce the forgivable amount. The issue there is the fact that you could have employees that their compensation structure hasn't changed at all, but they're making less money just because a piece of their comp is related to kind of commissions on the business activity that goes on. So we're always trying to help them create documents to give to the bank in order to back up why they've not really changed any compensation structures. And then the other question we get a lot is just, right now there's you can elect to have either the 8-week cover period or the 24-week is just questions as simple as, well, if I spend the money in 12 weeks, can I apply for forgiveness then? And it clearly is allowed to do that. And then recently, it's even started to pivot farther. I know Jimmy mentioned earlier the restaurants and what's going to happen with them. some of our clients that are in that industry are now trying to figure out what it looks like even after this loan forgiveness happens, how they sustain their businesses going forward, given the restrictions that we're under just from a purely economical standpoint. And so with that, I'll let you just turn it over to questions and answers, and maybe we can get everyone taken care of before we're done here today.
Yeah, thank you, Harold. Okay, we have some questions that they emailed us. The first question, what documents are needed for payroll expenses and non-payroll expenses?
Well, I'll start, and then Harold, you can finish.
Yep.
So I think it's important that if you have employees, that you have your 940, 941s, and then hopefully, excuse me, what you've done is you've taken that PPP money and put it into a separate account. And then what you can do at the bank that you receive the PPP money from, okay, that's key. And then you have the bank statement that will show, the expenses running through that account. And so therefore you'll have that documentation to be able to submit. If you're a single member LLC and a sole proprietor and a 1099, then actually you're going to have your Schedule Cs that you're going to submit along with the bank statement showing that you've actually taken the money to pay yourself. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Harold?
Yeah, and I think, the key part of it is providing all the documents to determine, again, going back to the full-time equivalents as to how you calculated that and what method you used and the underlying payroll reports that support all the numbers that are in that calculation. With businesses with quite a number of employees, that gets to be a pretty big calculation and pretty complex. And it's important that you've gone through that whole process and make sure you've taken advantage of the exceptions they have related to full-time. If you have less full-time equivalents at the last measurement date of when you apply for forgiveness, you want to make sure that you have documentation as it relates to if you offered someone their job back and they refused to take it, or if they quit on their own, or if they were terminated for cause. You're going to need to provide a lot of that kind of documentation and have it available if there's any questions asked by both your bank, because this is a two-step process. It's going to go to the bank, and someone there is going to make a determination as to whether you qualify, and then it goes to the SBA, and they do the same thing.
Now, your bank has 60 days to make the determination on if it's going to be 100% forgivable, and then they'll send it over to the SBA, and the SBA has, I think it's 30 days if I recall, to make the final determination on if the loan is forgivable.
And how about non-payroll expenses? What documents are needed for non-payroll expenses?
Yeah, you're going to want to keep invoices that you would have paid, whether it's utility invoices. If you're making lease payments, you're going to want to have the lease agreement available to show that what the monthly amount is that you should have been paying. So anything that's going to support any expenditure that you use these funds on, it's going to be important to have a document to support that.
Thank you. And another question is related to number one question is, we have two accounts in different banks. Payroll goes out from payroll account in Bank A. Then we transfer money from PPP account in Bank B to Bank A's payroll account. Is it okay to do that? Do we need to, and continue the question, do we need to make a transfer on every pay period, or can we transfer all at once?
So I will tell you that we advise our clients to make it every transfer based on every pay period.
Right.
And again, transferring it based on the calculation that you've done for qualified payroll costs. So if you've got business owners or someone who's making over 100,000, you can't just assume that the total payroll expense should be paid through the PPP. You have to adjust it for those other kind of complications.
Thank you. Next question. If an owner pays him or herself with W-2, is this still under 852 rule?
I believe what they're talking about is the owner has special limits on their compensation that will be forgiven through the PPP related to maybe what they were paid in 2019. Right. And yeah, it doesn't matter how they're paid, whether it's on a W-2 or not, those same limitations apply.
Right.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Rob, you want to say something?
All right, so we've been talking about PPP since the end of March, and we're still getting the same questions about how the money can be used. So I'm going to repeat it again. The PPP was put in place to try to keep employees on the payroll. Originally, 75% was to be used toward payroll. The Flexibility Act lowered it to 60%. Originally, 25% was to be used for electric, gas, water, business telephone, internet, lease rent payment, interest on a commercial mortgage. Those are the uses of the funds. Stay within the parameters of how the program was set up. If you use the money for other than what the program was set up for, then you can run into trouble. So,
we just need to tell them, Rod, that if you use the money for other than what the legislation has intended, it is simply fraud. You are committing fraud. That is what the legal definition is. And it's fraud is what you can be prosecuted for. So it's not a situation you want to be in.
Okay, thank you. Next, since the SBA released a PPP loan forgiveness application, can I complete and submit now?
If you've used the funds for, let's say you received the funds and now 8 weeks have gone by,
Right.
then sure, you can go ahead and do just that. And again, and Harold, you can, of course, back me up on this. So from what I have seen, there have been a lot of single member LLCs, sole proprietors, and 1099s. And so that's specifically what the EZ form is to be used for.
Right.
And then if you have a lot of employees and you're going to use the long form, I would advise you to bring Harold on to help you work through the calculations to get the long form completed correctly.
Rod, also too, actually, this is a question for both you and Harold. Wouldn't you agree that some of the banks are ready and others are not to work through that forgiveness process? Or are they actually being able to process the forgiveness applications now?
Yeah, I would, and that's a correct statement. Some are ready and some aren't.
Right.
I've already received, questions from some of the banks in the area. Can we
Right.
go ahead and start processing? And I said, absolutely, you can.
Right. And I think some are more prepared to help their customers through that forgiveness process or not, right? I think some of the banks, from what I'm hearing from clients, need just a little bit more time before they understand the process a little better.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, next. How long do I have to allocate the funds received from the loan disbursement? A week, 24 weeks, or in between?
Well,
Yeah.
we'll go ahead.
And I think the answer, Rod, is just, the answer is yes. I mean, you can elect 8 weeks or 24 weeks, but even if you elect 24 weeks and you use it up in 12, at that point in time, you can apply for loan forgiveness.
Right.
Please do not wait until the end of the year to apply for forgiveness.
Forgiveness. That's really not advisable.
Yeah, people needs to take a vacation at that time, I know. Next, what happens to the portion of my PPP loan that isn't forgiven? Do I need to sign a new note for unforgivable portion?
You will sign a note for the portion that has not been forgiven. That is correct.
But doesn't their original note just carry forward under those terms? I mean, I don't know that they have to re-sign a note agreement.
Some banks, yes, Harold. Yes, to what you've just said. There are some banks that are talking about they'll have them do
A new one?
Another
a
note.
new note.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it depends on banks.
The bank.
It depends on the bank.
Yeah.
Okay. Next.
And that's it. Oh, Stephanie, let me just add something too. And again, for the people here in the webinar, every bank is going to handle things maybe even just slightly differently, right? So that's something to keep in mind as you go through this forgiveness process, that the way your vendor or customers PPP loan forgiveness process has been handled, please don't assume that yours is going to be handled the exact same way.
Yeah, that's important to note, because I know I have a lot of clients that have a lot of friends that are also business owners, and they'll come to me with questions going, well, their bank didn't ask for this, or their bank didn't ask for that. So there is a different process based on the financial institution.
Right. And also know that the larger banks, and I don't want to name them, they have a more complicated process than perhaps a smaller community bank. That's just the way that I have seen this whole entire process go.
Okay, next, what costs are eligible to be forgiven? I think we already discussed this.
We answered that.
Yep.
Next, are bonuses, hazard pay permitted?
The short answer is yes, it is. Now, Harold, help me with this one, because I've received a question about the owners actually giving themselves bonuses. And I've said, well, I think you probably want to steer clear of that and just make sure if you're going to bonus to give hazard pay, just give it to the employees.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the additional restriction on the business owners from as part of the forgiveness calculation of what they can be paid, kind of leads you to believe that even more, that you don't be bonusing the business owners out money.
Right. And let me add something here too. Just because something is legal doesn't mean we should do it. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I think that we should all be judicious with how we spend the money, and then also keep in mind that perceptions matter.
Okay, next, how do I calculate my business costs, business expenses, and estimate my forgiveness? I guess this question is to Harold.
Yeah, you fill out the forgiveness application is what you end up doing.
And then you call Harold.
Well, yeah, or call Harold to do the forgiveness application with you. Yeah,
So
but
just follow.
yeah, that's really the only way to do it.
Right.
Okay. Next, what will a reduction in employee salary and wages have on the loan forgiveness amount? What will a reduction in employees' salary or wages have on the loan forgiveness amount?
So Harold, if I recall, the wages can't go below 25% of what they're
Correct.
making. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
And if it goes lower than that, then there's a reduction of the forgiveness amount.
Right.
Yeah.
Next, what do I do with employees that refuse to come back to work? I'm not able to use PPP funds.
Well, it's important to document that. And
Right.
so what you want to do is have the conversation. Actually, I'd send them an offer letter and, get that out to them. And if they're refusing to come back to work, then, have them, state on the letter that they're refusing to come back to work. And so you won't be penalized if that person doesn't come back. That gives you the opportunity actually to go out and hire someone else in their place.
Yeah, I think it keeps you from having a reduction because of full-time equivalent issues.
Right.
What is important is, again, like you said, is to get them to sign something to say they're refusing to come back.
Right.
And that's one of those exceptions that they will allow you not to be penalized for it.
Exactly. And they listed that came out, I think, Harold, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, they listed that in the exceptions. But, this is really a situation we've encountered with several clients. For various reasons, employees don't feel safe. I mean, they have a number of reasons why. But the importance for any small business owner is, particularly as it relates to the PPP loan, is that you do need to document it for accounting purposes, and document it obviously for legal purposes of why your employee has decided not to come back. And, I always say, let's, during these times, be compassionate and understand that people have their reasons, and we're not walking in everyone's moccasins, but particularly as a small business owner and an employer, you really want to be compassionate and understanding as the reasons why people may not feel safe returning to the workplace.
Okay, next, I have an idle specific question. In the loan documents in the compensation section, it indicates that compensation from other sources, including grants from government and private organizations, should be submitted to the SBA. Does this mean we cannot apply for other COVID-19 related financial resources?
No, you can.
Next, if you received an idle loan, can you apply again? What can or cannot you use the idle loan for?
You can't have 2 idle loans.
Cannot.
You cannot have 2 PPP loans. The expenses to be paid for from idle, payroll, interest on a mortgage, commercial mortgage, internet, business telephone, accounts payable, gas, water, electric. Those are the expenses that can be paid for using idle funds. And remember, it's a loan, so you have a 30-year payback. You don't have to make the first payment on that loan for 12 months. Yes, interest is accruing, but you don't have to make a payment on that loan for 12 months. Also remember, when you apply, you get $1,000 per FTE or PTE up to $10,000. And you don't have to do anything for that to be forgiven.
Okay, next, how long is the process for forgiveness application once submitted?
All right, so the bank has 60 days to review it
Right.
and then get it over to the SBA within that 60 days. Then the SBA has 30 days, and then the SBA goes back to the bank and says, yes, 100%, 75%, 60%, whatever it may be, is forgiven. So what's that, 90 days in total?
We have more questions come in the chat room. Okay, already answers few of them. Next, would that be okay if we had more FTEs at the end of the year for forgiveness?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine if you have more than you had at the beginning.
Yeah, that's okay.
Next, can we use non-payroll expenses more than 8 weeks?
So within that, you're talking about, I guess they mean within 40%, the other 40%.
Yeah, as long as it's within that 40%, it can be more than 8 weeks, yeah.
Next, are the expenses under non-payroll covered under forgiveness?
As long as it's within the 40%.
Right. Asked and answered, I think.
Yeah.
Well, this will be a loan, not forgivable, right?
If it's
Non-payroll.
if it's used within what we've discussed,
Right.
those expenses that are covered, yes, they can be 100% forgivable.
Right.
Mhm.
As long as they fall within the parameters.
Let me say this too, because on another call, I said, look, you can use 100% of the funds for payroll.
Right.
And have it forgiven. Or, you can use the 60-40 split, but use the money for what the program was designed for. Again, as long as you use it and stay within the parameters of the program, then you're fine.
Also can be forgivable.
Yes, it's 100% forgivable.
Right. Okay, it is permissible to utilize PPP with work share.
And see, I'm not familiar with the work share program.
Or am I?
I don't know either.
Know what that is?
How and if idle qualifies for forgiveness, I have no employees. Can I use it for repairs needed?
We don't have forgiveness for idle. We've stated that before.
Right.
Stated the expenses that idle can be used for. Stay within the parameters of what the money can be used for. It's very specific.
Next, Can self-employee use all the PPP pay themselves as payroll expenses? I think we answered that.
Yeah,
but
as long as it's
Yes.
We
within,
did.
as long as it's within the limits of what
Right.
the limits for a owner is.
Next, is the forgivable portion of the PPP going to be taxable to the business at the end of the year?
It's supposed to, well, Harold, it's supposed to be non-taxable.
Yeah, but it's kind of, and here's why. So the forgiven part is not brought into income, but the IRS has come out and said that all the expenses that you paid with those funds are not tax deductible.
Right.
So if you got $1 million and you got it all forgiven, those $1 million of expenses that you paid are not deductible for you on your tax return.
Okay, next. We are the government contractor. We bill and receive payments under our contracts with government as our contracts stipulate. If we received PPP at the same time, does that count double billing as
Yes.
Sherilyn stated?
Yes, that's double billing. That is in fact double billing.
It is.
Indeed it is.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, so you'll have to give the government credit for your
Right.
PPP money that you got.
During that 8-week period, you're gonna have to go back and give the government credit because you double billed.
Next, someone who was denied for idle, can this person reapply appeal by emailing SBA?
Yes, you certainly can.
Yes,
And it depends on, what you were declined for.
exactly. I have found with several clients, actually, one that I share with Harold, is that especially if you applied for the idle loan in the very beginning, they revise things a little bit. So sometimes the information that you provide is not clear, right? Because again, idle, you're submitting it directly to the SBA. There's no bank that's reviewing your documents, right? So I'm finding that there's a few more mistakes with the idle application. In any event, yes, you can resubmit and contact them to clarify any questions that may have gone wrong in the application. The answer is yes.
Okay, next. Does idle total loan amount need to use and document for 3 years time frame only?
So wait a minute. So when they say 3-year time frame, that they have to use the money within 3 years, or do they need to retain the documents for 3 years?
Yeah. What's the question?
Yeah.
Does idle total loan amount need to use and document for 3 years time frame only?
So there's not, well, I guess I'll answer it this way. So the maximum amount for idle now is 150,000.
50.
And you don't have a time frame
Right.
to use it within,
Right.
right? You just don't.
Right.
So now you do want to keep your documentation. Actually, I think Sherilyn mentioned it for 6 years.
Yeah, for the PPP loan, it's 6 years, but I would keep it for the idle loan as well, because it's all during this pandemic period. So
Yes.
I would retain the documents the same amount of time, just an abundance of caution.
Mm-hmm.
If we had no reduction in FTEs, are we allowed to use easy form for forgiveness application?
I wouldn't.
Right.
Harold can probably better answer that. I wouldn't.
I believe based on the instructions, you can use it, but I don't know that I would use it.
Right.
Right.
I think if you have employees, you need to be able to do the calculations, which are on the long form. So you should use that. I mean, I don't know how many employees they're talking about, but again, if I have employees, I would use that long form.
Yeah, the distinction for me is, sole proprietor, single member LLCs
Right.
and 1099s use the
Right.
easy form.
Exactly.
Everybody else, you're using the long form, and you're going to call Harold so he can do the calculations for you.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. That's how I look at it.
How does the forgiveness amount impact the overhead rate calculation for 2020?
Mm.
I mean, technically, you're going to have to adjust it for any of those costs that were paid through the PPP, right? If there's non-specific costs that aren't attached to a specific contract, you would need to make some adjustment to that overhead rate.
Follow up with the government contract question. Can the company use PPP without billing the government for those 2 months?
I suppose you can, but I would definitely talk to your contracting officer and get
Yes.
guidance, because if they see you not billing for 2 months, I mean, I just don't know what that does to your paperwork. I mean, I think you're complicating things, so.
I think on the surface you can do that, but I would
Right.
definitely, whatever you do, whether you're giving them a credit or doing something
Right.
like that, you need to get the agency to be okay with it.
Right, because again, all of these agencies have a particular way that they want things done, and your contracting officers within those agencies all want different things done a certain way. So I would get clarity from them before you proceed any particular way.
Yeah, Sherilyn is expertise government contracting attorney. Feel free to contact her if you have, because I know each company has different questions.
Right.
So feel free to contact Sherilyn for your situation.
And also, and let me just add one more thing, Stephanie, especially if you're doing business with someone with an agency like DOD, they have a whole lot of complicated regulations and how they are very particular about how they want things done. And if you're a sub, you need to talk to your prime and ask your prime what they're doing. Because again, you want to be consistent with the prime too. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. It's 4 o'clock. I think we read all the questions and answer all of them. If you don't have any questions, perfect time. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's all we have today. Thank you very much for your attending this helpful webinar. And a lot of people said it's very informative. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Stephanie, can we all put our information in the chat so that they can reach Harold and Rod and myself, just in case people have additional questions? I just put mine in the chat.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just did. I'm doing it now. And we'll probably be back here in about 3 weeks as we have another $1 trillion or two passed.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
We need another bill to pass, right? Another COVID bill.
So I'm sure.
Then we will have.
So I'm sure.
Yeah, then we will have another webinar for that.
Right.
Yeah, data information. Yeah, we'll keep everyone posted, and I'm sure this Cindy will post this webinar shortly. Thank you.
We will share the video link recording in 1 or 2 days. You can check Chamber YouTube channel And thank you again, our distinguished panel speakers, Rod, Harold, and Sherilyn. And we truly appreciate your support and just wonderful, wonderful advice. I think the attendees are so lucky to be able to hear from you guys. And thank you, everyone. Look forward
Yes.
to maybe seeing everyone next Wednesday. We have a special webinar on legal issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye. Take care.
And Jimmy, thank you also.